One other thing that we haven't touched on yet, though maybe I alluded to it being in Dopamine Nation at the beginning of our conversation when we were talking about the social factors that contribute to addiction. There are social factors that can help treat addiction as well. So maybe you'd like to talk about those a bit.
Yeah, so there's lots of evidence that human connection and having meaningful relationships with other people is protective. There's lots of evidence that belonging to a religious organization and actively participating in that organization is protective for the development of addiction, with the exception potentially of being an Irish Catholic when it comes to alcohol addiction. So this is sort of interesting data. In general, it's protective, but there are some silos where it's not necessarily protective. And that Irish Catholic thing is probably a combination of cultural mores around drinking, as well as maybe some innate biological inherited vulnerability to alcohol addiction. There are all kinds of sociological protective factors. So, having meaningful work, living as part of a functional family, having a close, sober social network. These are all protective factors. So, kind of the things you would imagine.
And another key point or topic as we discuss, or as you discuss recovery in the book, is honesty, and going along with honesty, shame. And how do these two things figure into the recovery process?
Well, one of the things I've learned from my patients over many years is that the ones who get into and maintain long-term recovery are the ones who have learned that they can't lie. And it's not just that they can't lie about their addiction and their use. They can't lie about anything. They can't even lie about why they were late for a meeting. They have to be radically honest, which got me really curious. What is that phenomenon? How does that relate to compulsive overconsumption? And I speculate in the book a bunch of different reasons why, including the possibility that intentionally engaging in truth-telling might actually bolster the prefrontal cortex, which functions like the brakes on the car. And there's some inferential evidence to suggest that may be the case, as well as the fact that truth-telling, I think, socially creates a plenty mindset as opposed to a scarcity mindset. And I use for evidence the famous marshmallow experiment, where kids were told, if you don't eat this marshmallow for 15 minutes, you'll get a second one. But there was another experiment where half the kids were told, if you ring this bell within those 15 minutes, a researcher will come back. And the other half were told the same thing, but in one of those groups, the researcher actually came back, and the other group, they didn't come back when the kid rang the bell. And in the group where the kids were lied to, they were much more likely to eat the marshmallow before the 15 minutes was up. So this idea that when we can't trust the people around us to do the things that they said they were going to do, it puts us into this kind of scarcity mindset or survival mode, where, of course, we're thinking, I'm going to eat this marshmallow right now because who knows if I'm really going to get the second one when they come back. So, different sort of levels of trying to understand that phenomenon. And then I have a whole section on shame. To me, shame is really interesting. Shame is very pervasive in addiction and can be really a barrier to getting into recovery. The overwhelming shame that people feel about these behaviors, which then perpetuate the addictive behaviors. But I make the point that we wouldn't want to be without shame. Shame is a highly pro-social emotion. If we didn't experience shame about these behaviors, we wouldn't be motivated to change them. So it's figuring out what to do with shame and how to make it positive so that it propels positive behavior change. And I think that really depends on what others do with our shame, right? If we sort of admit to some shameful activity and we're shunned for it, that's likely to contribute to these ongoing maladaptive behaviors. But if we're actually embraced for it, like people are in Alcoholics Anonymous, then we can really leverage shame as a way to promote intimacy and propel behavior change. So I talk a lot about that.